My husband told everyone I was adopted, so I proved he wasn't my children's real father either. The moment I walked into that family barbecue and saw everyone's faces, I knew something was terribly wrong. My mother-in-law's eyes were cold, distant in a way that made my stomach drop. My sister-in-law couldn't even look at me directly, and the usual warm greetings felt forced and uncomfortable. I grabbed a plate and tried to act normal, but the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My husband was acting strange too, hovering around me like he was waiting for something to explode. He kept touching my arm in this weird, possessive way that made my skin crawl. When I asked him what was going on, he just shrugged and said everyone was tired from work. But I knew better than that. 23 years of marriage teaches you to read between the lines, and these lines were screaming. Later that evening, my best friend called me in tears. She could barely get the words out, but when she did, my world shattered into a million pieces. My husband had been telling everyone at his workplace, at the gym, even at our local coffee shop, that I was adopted and had been lying about my family history for our entire marriage. He claimed I had some kind of identity crisis and was making up stories about my childhood. The worst part was the details he had invented. He told people I was actually from a completely different state, that my parents weren't really my parents, and that I had been searching for my birth family secretly. He even said I was considering DNA testing to find my real relatives. None of it was true, but he had been spreading these lies for months, maybe even years. I confronted him that night, and instead of apologizing or explaining, he doubled down. He said he thought it would be interesting to see how people reacted. He claimed it was harmless fun and that I was overreacting. The casual way he dismissed my feelings, like my reputation and relationships meant nothing, was more devastating than the lies themselves. Sleep became impossible. I would lie awake replaying every conversation, every strange look, every awkward pause from friends and family. Had they all been talking about me behind my back? Were they pitying me or judging me? The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. This was the man I had trusted with my deepest secrets, my fears, my dreams. I started noticing how our kids were being treated differently too. Other parents at school events seemed to whisper when they saw me coming. My daughter mentioned that some of her friends had asked weird questions about our family. My son seemed confused when neighbors would give him these sympathetic looks that made no sense to him. The isolation was crushing. I felt like I was living in a fishbowl, constantly being watched and judged based on lies. My own extended family started acting weird around me, like they were waiting for me to confess something. Even my elderly neighbor, who had been like a grandmother to our kids, seemed distant and confused whenever we talked. I decided to dig deeper into why he would do something so cruel and senseless. Going through his phone while he was sleeping, I found messages that made my blood run cold. He had been talking to his friends about how boring our marriage had become, how he needed some excitement in his life. Making up stories about me was apparently his way of creating drama and getting attention. But then I found something that changed everything. Hidden in his email drafts were messages he had never sent, messages to women he had met online. He wasn't just lying about me to make life interesting. He was laying groundwork for something much worse. He was telling these women that our marriage was falling apart because of my supposed identity issues and family problems. The pieces started falling into place. He was building a narrative where I was the unstable one, the one with problems, the one who couldn't be trusted. If our marriage ended, he would look like the victim who had tried to help his troubled wife. It was manipulation on a level I had never imagined possible from someone I loved. I felt sick realizing how calculated and deliberate his actions had been. This wasn't some stupid mistake or moment of poor judgment. He had been systematically destroying my reputation and relationships for his own selfish purposes. The man I had built a life with, had children with, was essentially a stranger. My anger turned into something cold and focused. If he wanted to play games with family secrets and lies, I could play too. I started doing some research of my own, looking into things I had never questioned before. Our marriage certificate, our children's birth certificates, old photos, and documents I had never really examined closely. What I discovered was like finding a hidden door in a house you thought you knew completely. While going through some old boxes in our attic, I found papers that my husband had always kept private. Medical records, old correspondence, documents that painted a very different picture of our family history than what I had believed. The first shocking revelation was about our oldest child. The timeline didn't match up with what I remembered about our early relationship. According to the medical records I found, our daughter was conceived during a period when my husband was supposedly out of town for work. But there were credit card receipts showing he was actually in the city the entire time. Digging deeper, I found more inconsistencies. Our son's birth certificate had some unusual details that I had never noticed before. There were medical notes about complications during delivery that nobody had ever mentioned to me. It was like discovering that the story of your own life had been edited by someone else. The most devastating discovery came when I found old letters hidden in his personal safe. Love letters from another woman, dated right around the time our first child was born. They were passionate, intimate, and contained references to a future together that obviously never happened. But more importantly, they contained details about pregnancy scares and close calls that made my head spin. I realized that while my husband had been lying about my adoption story, he had been hiding much bigger secrets about our own family. The irony was suffocating. He had been accusing me of having false family history while concealing the truth about our children's paternity. The hypocrisy was almost too much to process. Getting DNA tests done without his knowledge was easier than I expected. I took samples from the kids' toothbrushes and sent them to multiple labs to make sure the results were accurate. The waiting period was torture, but I had to know the truth. If he could lie so easily about me, what else had he been lying about? When the results came back, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the testing center and cried for an hour. Our beautiful daughter, the child I had raised and loved for 15 years, shared no DNA with the man who had been playing father to her. Our son's results were even more complicated, showing genetic markers that suggested multiple possible fathers. The betrayal felt like drowning in slow motion. Not only had he been lying about me to everyone we knew, but our entire family was built on lies that went back to the very beginning of our relationship. How many other women had there been? How many other secrets was he keeping? How many other lies had I been living without knowing it? I spent weeks planning my next move. I couldn't just confront him with this information without being prepared for the fallout. I needed to protect my children, secure my finances, and make sure I had all the documentation I needed. Most importantly, I needed to figure out how to handle this revelation with the kids. The hardest part was acting normal around him while knowing what I knew. Making dinner, helping with homework, going to school events, all while carrying this enormous secret felt like acting in a play where I was the only one who knew the real script. Every time he smiled at the kids or acted like the loving father, I wanted to scream. I started gathering evidence of his lies about my adoption too. Screenshots of social media posts, recordings of conversations where he repeated his false stories, witness statements from friends who had heard his lies. If this was going to be a war of truth versus lies, I was going to be armed with everything I needed. The day I decided to reveal everything was our anniversary. 23 years of marriage, and I was about to blow it all up. I waited until the kids were at their friends' houses for sleepovers. Then I laid out all the evidence on our kitchen table like a crime scene investigation. DNA results, love letters, medical records, everything. When he walked in from work and saw the papers spread out, his face went completely white. For the first time in months, he was speechless. He stood there staring at the evidence of his own lies and betrayals, and I could see his mind racing to find some way to spin this in his favor. I told him about the DNA tests first, watching his face crumble as he realized that his biggest secret was out. Then I showed him all the evidence I had gathered about his lies regarding my adoption. The tables had turned completely, and now he was the one whose life was about to be destroyed by the truth. His reaction was everything I expected and worse. He tried to deny it, then minimize it, then blame me for snooping. He said the paternity issues were ancient history, and that he was the only father our children had ever known. He claimed his lies about my adoption were just stupid mistakes that got out of hand. But I was done listening to his explanations and excuses. I had made copies of everything and stored them in multiple places. I had already consulted with an attorney about divorce proceedings and custody arrangements. I had even started the process of telling our children the truth in age-appropriate ways. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, family conversations, and emotional breakdowns. Telling our teenage daughter that the man she called dad wasn't her biological father was the hardest thing I had ever done. Our son took the news differently, asking questions about his real father that I couldn't answer. The community response was swift and brutal for my husband. When word got out about what he had done, the same people who had been whispering about my supposed adoption were now gossiping about his lies and affairs. The sympathy I had expected to receive was overshadowed by the drama of the paternity revelations. Our divorce proceedings became a public spectacle in our small town. Everyone had opinions about who was right and who was wrong. Some people blamed me for exposing the truth and hurting the children. Others praised me for standing up for myself and refusing to live a lie. The division was exhausting and painful. The kids struggled with everything, but they also showed incredible resilience. Our daughter started asking questions about finding her biological father, while our son seemed more focused on understanding why his dad had lied about everything. They were both angry, confused, and hurt, but they were also relieved to finally understand why their family had felt so strange and tense. My ex-husband's reputation was completely destroyed, but he still fought for custody and visitation rights. He claimed that regardless of biology, he was still their father in every way that mattered. The court battles were messy and expensive, but I was determined to protect my children from further manipulation and lies. In the end, the truth set us all free, but freedom came with a price. Our family was broken, our community was divided, and my children were dealing with identity issues that would probably last for years. But we were no longer living a lie, and that had to count for something. Looking back, I realized that his lies about my adoption were just the tip of the iceberg. He had been lying about so many things for so long that he probably didn't even know what the truth was anymore. The DNA revelations were shocking, but they were also liberating in a way I hadn't expected. Now, 2 years later, our daughter has connected with her biological father, and our son is in counseling to help him process everything. My ex-husband moved to another state and rarely contacts the kids. I've started over completely, building a new life based on honesty and truth rather than the lies and secrets that defined our marriage. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the deepest betrayals. But it also taught me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, and that protecting my children and my own integrity is worth any amount of pain and struggle. The truth might have destroyed our family, but it also saved us from living a lie forever.